We are continuing to talk about vows. Specifically, we are going to be talking about membership vows. This is the second membership vow that people take in the United Methodist Church, and it sounds like this: to accept the freedom and power God gives you to resist evil, injustice, and oppression. And I want to focus in on that: to accept God's power and freedom, to accept God's grace. Not by our own strength do we commit to this, but we commit instead to accepting God's grace. And that's what we're talking about this week. Hello all, I'm the Mad Pastor, and Christianity sucks. It's boring, it's out of date, it's irrelevant, but it doesn't have to be. Let me explain why. So, to illustrate this point, this fundamental Christian idea, I want to go back to this letter that Paul wrote to the city of Corinth. But before we read that text, I want to talk a little bit about what that city is. So, first of all, the city of Corinth was a Greek city that was then destroyed by Rome about 150 years before Jesus was born. And then about 100 years later, so 50 years before Jesus was born, Rome settled that city. They rebuilt it and resettled it, and it became, a new kind of metropolis for Rome. And so it had a lot of Jews there because it was around that area, and like most Roman cities, it had a lot of at least a sizable population of Jewish people. And so there's already been, by the time this text that we're about to read, by the time this letter's been written, there's already been a lot of back and forth between Paul and the church in this city, Corinth, the city that's been destroyed and rebuilt. So there's some conflict actually going on. Paul alludes to several communications that have happened that we don't have historically. We don't know all of the letters that Paul wrote to Corinth and Corinth wrote to Paul. We just know that there's been some back and forth more than 1st and 2nd Corinthians. So we're in 2nd Corinthians, and Paul is writing kind of about this conflict. And it seems to imply that there was a group of what he calls super apostles later in the letter who are boasting about their specific special secret knowledge, their revelations that make them the ones that the church should be following instead of Paul. And Paul takes umbrage. Paul doesn't like that. And he says that fundamentally undermines salvation through faith. They're saying salvation through secret knowledge. They're known as Gnostics, by the way. That it's a branch of Christianity in the 1st and 2nd century that essentially was called heresy by later Christians. And they're saying that you have to have secret knowledge, and that's what gets you kind of like into heaven. If you have the secret knowledge, then you get to be in the special club. And Paul says, no, it's not knowledge and it's not works. It is faith. Faith and belief that Jesus Christ is who he says he is. So that's the kind of background for all this. And I hope that makes what I'm about to read make a little more sense. So let's take a look at 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 10. They sound like this. It is necessary to boast. This is Paul talking to the Corinthians. It is necessary to boast. Nothing is to be gained by it, but I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. Again, he's combating the idea that other people have had special visions and revelations, and that makes them powerful and worthy of following. I know a person in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the 3rd heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows. And I know that such a person, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard things that are not to be told, that no mortal is permitted to repeat. He's referring to like secret knowledge. On behalf of such a one, I will boast, but on my own behalf, I will not boast, except of my weakness. So he's saying, I know people with special secret knowledge, but I won't boast on their behalf. Instead, I'll boast on my behalf. And when I boast, it won't be of secret special knowledge. It will be of my weakness. I will boast of my weakness. But if I wish to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will be speaking the truth. But I refrain from it, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me. So I'm not hiding special secret knowledge. I'm not boasting that I know things that you don't, and I won't tell you because they're like, you can hear how he's fighting against this Gnostic idea. He's saying, I'm boasting in my weakness. And if I did boast in what I did, in my strengths, I would even boast in what you can confirm because you see me do it and you hear me say it. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given me in the flesh. We don't know exactly what that means, but it's a physical frailty and a pain. A messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. I prayed for the pain to leave, but the answer came, no, keep the pain. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more gladly of my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am content with weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong. So I hope you can hear the kind of background, because we're essentially getting into a conversation. It's like reality TV drama. And if you haven't been watching the first 3 seasons of The Housewives of whatever, and all of a sudden you pick up on episode 4 and they're yelling and screaming about stuff that you've never seen, like, it gets really confusing. That's kind of what we just read. So I hope the background will kind of inform you so that you can understand why they're arguing about these specific things. Paul is fighting against this Gnostic idea and these people who are trying to take over the church and lead the church astray. And he's saying, and again, I love the phrase, it's in the English translation, he calls them super apostles. He's like, these so-called super apostles that have all this special secret knowledge and tell you that they're the best people and you should follow them. And Paul's response to that is not to say, no, I have better, more knowledge and stronger knowledge. Instead, what he says is, hey, listen, I could boast about somebody else's secret knowledge, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to boast about my weakness. I'm not strong or knowledgeable or whatever. What I am is a recipient of God's grace. And every time I've prayed for more strength and for freedom from this so-called thorn in his side, God has said, no, accept my grace. And that's his point. Paul is saying you cannot do this Christian thing by works and by secret special knowledge. You must do it instead by faith. We are a people who ultimately are putting our trust in this God-man Jesus. That's the essence of what it means to be Christian. And that is why when we accept God's grace, we are able to follow in God's ways. And that's what this vow is about. It's a commitment to say, no, we're following someone else, and we're trusting that wherever God takes us and wherever God leads us, knowing that that will ultimately one day be something that's painful or difficult or hungry and thirsty and lonely, like all of these, maybe persecution. We can follow that God because we're not trusting in our ability to understand what's going on. We're trusting in God's grace to get us through it. There are a lot of people on TikTok and Instagram and all the socials who are, self-described life coaches and experts. And don't get me wrong, I'm friends with some of them. And some of them have good takes and helpful tips. But when we become people who seek fulfillment and we seek our being and our life in the midst of self-helpery and life coachery, those things ultimately cannot give you salvation. They cannot give you the kingdom of heaven. They cannot fulfill you in that spiritual way that all of us are seeking. They have knowledge. And some of it might be helpful. And by all means, get some tips and tricks to navigate the difficulties of this earth from wherever you can. Fair enough. But you cannot become fulfilled, and you cannot become a follower, a real spiritual sense of belonging to a heaven on this earth if you're seeking all of that in self-helpery and TikTok experts. It simply will not happen. Our fulfillment, our salvation, our wholeness ultimately comes from a faith that God is giving us grace and has done so through great sacrifice because God genuinely loves us and wants what is best for us. When we accept that grace, we can find freedom and we can find power and we can cooperate with the kingdom of heaven that is unfolding in our midst. That's good news. It's not up to you. It's not up to secret knowledge. It's not up to works. All we have to do is trust that God has done something for us in Jesus that we could not do for ourselves, and that will give us freedom and wholeness and heaven. So, may you boast in your weakness and boast of God's grace in the midst of your weakness, because it is God ultimately that we are trusting and following. I've been the Mad Pastor. This has been my rant about the second vow of membership in the United Methodist Church. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.